Welcome, everybody. Hello. Did you enjoy the food and beverage? Good, good, good. It's Thursday night. We're almost there. We're almost at the weekend. I want to thank you for coming to this event. I also want to thank our esteemed panelists, and they're going to do a quick intro here in just a few minutes. But hats off to the firm here for hosting. Morrison Mofo, I think we're calling it. I love it. Mofo, I love it. One of my favorite bands. And then also, the organization ACG for Silicon Valley, and Brad here, and also Ashley, who's really doing our best to bring the tech focus industry, not only in Northern California, but also across the US. And by way of introduction, I'm coming to you from San Clemente in Orange County. And I've been with Microsoft for 3 years. And as the high-tech industry executive, and prior to that, I was at Adobe, leading the sales teams for the digital media, digital marketing, a couple startups out of Israel, one out of Israel, I take that back, and then 16 years at Cisco. So no stranger to the Bay Area. I actually lived up here for about 3 years. So I wanted to thank you, and we're super excited. Has anybody heard about this AI thing or ChatGPT? And it's crazy. AI has been around for 30 years. Some will say 10. We could also talk about the metaverse and immersive experience. It's been around since the early 80s, right? But all you need is that switch to take you into a generative use cases, and you lower the bar for creators, developers, and all of a sudden, and I was talking to some of my Microsoft colleagues, it's like we're talking about products, and all of a sudden we just jumped to outcomes. Real quick.
That's okay. We want to do a little introduction on ACG.
Oh, absolutely. No, I'm sorry. Yeah, so we want to do the intros and then. Okay, fantastic. Sorry about that.
Nope, don't worry.
Please speak.
Yeah. So, a very warm welcome from ACG Silicon Valley. Obviously, I'm not Yvonne Schwab, who is the CEO of ACG. Unfortunately, Yvonne fell sick today. And as the most senior board member, just by being on the board, not by age, she kindly asked me to say a couple of words on behalf of ACG. First of all, she, let's say, convinced me to state the obvious, that ACG Silicon Valley is the leading business networking organization, like everybody knows, with providing connections, thought leadership, and enabling personal and organizational growth. So tonight, we are very thankful that Morrison Foerster is hosting us for this great event, and thank you so much for your hospitality and the food and also the technical features you have presented to help us to make this event a success. So before we are going to start, Yvonne wanted me to hint to a couple of future events we are going to host. It's the M&A Circle on February 22nd from 4 to 6 p.m. at the offices of Reed Smith. This circle will focus on the 2023 private equity landscape. And the next keynote is going to be in a month from now on March 16 at the Multiverse in Palo Alto, covering the topic Fusion Power, the Future of Energy. So, and Yvonne was sending me several messages. That's the reason I have to switch devices now. The biggest news is, like some of you hopefully remember, we had our annual keynote event, let's say our signature event, the Grow Awards. And after 3 years and pandemic-related hiatus, we are back on April 27 in a new venue, which is also going to be with Microsoft. And we are happy to host the Grow Awards again on April 27, and maybe look at our website. Maybe you want to attend personally or host a table. Whatever, we are more than happy to welcome you there, and we are really happy to be back with in-person events. With this, I would like to hand over to Ashley, who can give you more information about what the event tonight is about. Thank you so much.
Okay. Yeah, go ahead. Yes, so as Matt already stated, we're super lucky. We're going to be doing technical events like this upcoming. This is a really relevant one for today, obviously, with all the news. One of our cool events that we have coming up that we're planning is going to be sustainable energy. And we're trying to work on getting some of the people that were involved in the recent release of the fusion energy test and experiments we've been hearing about. So, and we're widely open to suggestions. So if there's topics that excite you, I know Brad and I are always eager to learn and listen to our constituents. So feel free to introduce us to new ideas that we think we should pull in for future events. Matt, continue on.
Ashley, thank you.
Yeah.
Appreciate it. All right, so with that, sorry for the interruption. I guess I was a little out of sync. But so who's, in your role, by a hand raise, who's got a AI-centric responsibility within their company? Okay. And the rest will have your hands up, in the next 3 months. But with that, I just want to thank you again. I appreciate it. Thanks to all the sponsors. And let's just introduce our panel. So should we start right here? Katarina?
Hi, my name is Katarina Körner. I work at the IPP. That's a non-for-profit with 75,000 members. We're the global organization for privacy professionals. You might be aware that we have those certifications like CIPP and really big conferences with 3,000 to 5,000 people. And so any privacy related questions. So I'm working in the IPP research and insight team as the principal researcher for technology, and I'm covering privacy enhancing technologies, AI governance, privacy by design, and things alike. So thanks for inviting me, and please.
Good evening. My name is Brad Garston. I'm the CEO of Quanta Networks, and I'm also the co-chair for the CTO Innovation Circle here with ACG. From a company perspective, we focus on system and data integration and focusing really on being able to read and look at the data and see what the data actually tells us. We recently launched a product in consumer data privacy as well. So as there are new laws, this helps people to navigate those laws. That product is called privacycare.io. So check it out. Thanks.
Hi, I'm Stephanie Sharon. I am a partner in the technology transactions practice here at Morrison & Foerster, and my practice focuses on representing companies that are leveraging data through technology and helping them navigate the interesting issues that arise. So this is an exciting panel for me, and looking forward to the discussion.
Good evening, I'm Carlos Escapa. I'm with Amazon Web Services. I lead the data and AI practice in our Global Systems Integrators unit. And before that, I was at Meta. When I joined it, it was called Facebook. And I actually spent a couple of years on deep learning. Actually, a lot of what I did was large language models for those 2 years. And before that, I was with Amazon as well. As you can tell from my accent, I'm not local like most of us here. Yeah, I've been in the Valley for 8 years. I've actually been based around the world. I've been very lucky that I've worked out of Tokyo, out of Paris and Barcelona, and now I am here in the Bay Area.
Ms. Carlos?
Hi, I'm Eric. I'm on what we call a global black belt team, which is as someone describes, a highfalutin name, but to drive customer understanding and adoption of artificial intelligence, machine learning. So, so we do focus. So now we're all OpenAI all the time, and ChatGPT and all the acronyms and terms related to that. But what we really focus on is helping go from sort of hype to business value. And how do you actually take some advanced technology and make it apply to your business need and get to production in a way that's valuable and useful and can scale. So it's a privilege to get to work with a lot of different customers and get to be a part of different events. So glad to be here tonight and eager to share and listen and learn from each other. It's a great group. So thank you.
Thank you. So I'm going to actually start with you, if you don't mind, because I know it's been a tsunami of questions and inquiries.
Yeah.
But the premise of this whole event was around AI, but a lot around ChatGPT, AI, DALL-E 2, the creator economy. So as we are on the heels of this announcement, whether it's Google with Bard, I think Quora with Poe, OpenAI with Microsoft, and it's early. But what are some of the opportunities and also risks that you're seeing in terms of how this technology can shape the future for our customers and our partners?
Yeah, I think, the opportunities I think are fantastic, right? It's because it can apply to so many different areas of the business, from automating conversations to automating IT work, to automating marketing work with digital image generation and video and moving images coming soon. Like it just can apply to so much of the business. So I think that's the opportunity, is to find efficiency and basically, save people from the routine tasks that take up, that Pareto principle applies, where it takes up a lot of our time doing routine, repetitive things that aren't high value add. So I think that's the opportunity. And then the risk is, there's a few, right? We really need to protect privacy. That's why, like, for us, anyone who wants to get into this has to be vetted and has to go through an application process. Even customers that you think like, oh, well, that's the biggest this in the world or that in the world, they're sort of shocked that they're waiting in line with others just to make sure that they have a use case in mind, they have privacy in mind, that they're checking that they acknowledge certain things. And then the hype risk is probably it too, right? At Gartner, their hype cycle is one of my favorite graphics, because I like to think of myself as young, but young at heart probably. I've seen those hype cycles over the years, right? Things have gone into the tranche of lowliness and up, and so this is in that initial phase where everybody's excited. So I think as people realize what it is and what it can do, the opportunity can be realized as you sort of recognize, like, it's not a magic bullet, it's not the best thing since sliced bread, but it is very powerful at what it's good at. So that's how I would characterize the opportunity and the risk, Matt.
Yeah, I think it's really, or it is. I appreciate that, Carlos. You've done a huge body of work, right, specifically around this in data and AI. Plus your experience at Meta. What are your thoughts on the risks and opportunities?
I would say the biggest risk is misunderstanding the technology, and I think that it is already happening in a major way. You see how journalists are reacting very sharply about what's happening, and then they give blanket coverage, right, to this tool, which is it is really epoch defining. But gosh, we have to be a little bit careful with explaining what it is, because the term artificial intelligence is incorrect. There's no intelligence in artificial intelligence. This is something that everybody should be aware of. We're actually getting really good about making inferences, but we are not really achieving anything in semantics, for instance. So these models actually don't understand at all what they're manipulating or what they're doing. We're actually turning words into vectors, and then we're manipulating vectors, and we're doing really incredible things with them. I mean, we're talking about 6 trillion operations that are being done to train a model. So this is really a new frontier for mathematics that is enabled by the computing power. But if you don't have expertise, you can actually very quickly get into a situation where you think that an inference is the truth or becomes the truth. And that is not the case. Now, with that massive caveat out of the way, AI is a reality, and it is here today, and it is with us, and we're seeing a lot of very good adoption that is happening without a lot of fanfare. So, if it's okay, I'll mention a couple of projects that we have done. The Department of Work and Pensions in the UK, for instance. For citizens that are in real need, people that are handicapped, single mothers, and unemployed people, and so on, they can go to the UK government for help. There's a very big welfare system, much bigger than in the US. I think you're all aware of it. And when these people apply for aid, it used to take about 36 days, if everything was okay, from the moment that they requested help until the moment it was delivered. So applying deep learning to be able, for instance, to scan pages that have applications for aid, scan medical forms that obviously somebody who's handicapped has to produce. It has been possible to automate the intake of data, and then using robotic process automation, be able to verify that a given citizen complies with the rules required for them to be eligible for aid. Today, they're actually getting the money in 24 to 48 hours. And these are people in need. And we're talking about 2 million cases in the last 3 years. When COVID hit, then that was a moment where these systems had to scale up. And obviously, cloud helps as well, right? Because you have compute at very large scale. So this is an example of how AI is quietly being introduced, and is being introduced in a very positive manner, without controversy, without problems with privacy, in a way that is actually helping people that are otherwise in very vulnerable conditions. The effect of this is that the case officers now are spending, as was pointed out, a lot less time with clerical work. They're not there just entering data and looking at forms and so on. They're actually now proactively calling citizens because there are people that are in such big need that they don't even know that they are eligible for aid. So this is like almost like turning completely around the governmental processes that have been these citizens. So people are a lot more motivated to come to work. They're a lot more engaged in what they do when you take away these relatively low added value tasks and you automate them with AI.
Yep, that's great. Thoughts?
Sure.
From a legal perspective, right? So you've got all these things happening. So, use cases, that can be measured, things, where does the legal mind sit in this matter? And is it time to have an opinion, or is it time to adjust and learn and adapt? Kind of like you were saying with journalism, it's like we have to embrace it, understand it, and then figure out how we want to regulate it.
Yeah. So I think it's a combination of the two. I really like the way that NIST, I'm going to take the risk of not getting into all the benefits and be the Debbie Downer and talk about the potential harms, because as the lawyer, that's what we do all day, is think about the worst case scenarios, Debbie Downer. So I like the way that NIST actually in their recent standard describes the potential harms and divides them into three categories: potential harms to individuals or people, potential harms to organizations, and potential harms to society. And I think whenever we're looking at a potential application, we need to think about what are the potential harms and risks that exist, as well as the benefits, and then really do the appropriate impact assessment and go about designing and developing these systems responsibly. And that means designing in from the beginning up. And I'm happy to be on a panel with companies that have really been focused on looking at these issues and either implementing those principles themselves in their own products or providing the tools that their customers can use to do that. Examples of potential harm to people are things that you're reading about in the news every day. So things like potential discrimination or disparate impact as it relates to lending decisions, or resume screening, where you might feed in the resumes and end up weeding out a lot of great candidates because they don't happen to match your existing pool of employees who happen to be successful at your company. They may be from underrepresented groups. Criminal justice and bias in algorithms can impact groups of individuals inappropriately or unfairly in assessing like repeat offender likelihood in bail proceedings. Jury selection can be impacted. And then one of the things we're reading about in the news all the time is adverse impact on the kind of creative types, writers, artists, and others who really are uncertain right now about what the implications are of these systems. But beyond those individual harms, we also have harms that we deal with day to day in much more boring scenarios for organizations. So corporate use of AI already exists today. It's pervasive. We represent clients using AI in all kinds of ways. And the concerns they have are maybe less sexy from a media perspective, but they're things like product liability and risks of using data they may not have rights to, and the risks of generating output that might be considered violative of third-party rights, using third-party systems that may not have been vetted in the way that they would vet them. So not having kind of clear understanding of how those systems were developed and how they're generating their insights and output. So this is an exciting area to be practicing today, but lots and lots of potential issues for lawyers to focus on.
Yeah, I know we've got 4 more questions. We may start to blend them just as we, in the interest of time, but still land on where we need to land. But Brad, any thoughts or comments on that same question?
Yeah, I mean, I would say the things that we see every day, some of the opportunities are things in transportation that we see right now. Healthcare is another one. So you've already seen the articles in the news for the last year or two about early detection for diseases. So that's significant. And that's just going to become more and more and more. And also public safety. So unfortunately, we live in a fire zone. And so first responders and the state has been able to use different models to predict where fires will happen or won't happen. We, as a society, are building closer and closer to wildland. I actually live close to wildland as well, and the fires are getting closer and closer to us. So it's a matter of how they set up defensible space, for example. So they were able to model how that looks, where wind blows, where people should evacuate. I volunteer in my community also as a volunteer first responder and deal with some of these issues as well to try to help to say, where do we go? What do we do? People constantly ask me questions or say things like, when's the bus going to come pick us up? Like, there is no such thing. That's a little bit entitled of them. But anyway, and just understanding that it's dynamic and people don't know and they don't know where it's going to come from. So modeling it and trying to help to predict where to go if the wind's coming from the southeast or the northwest in a particular direction. Where should you go? What should you do? So the technology is already starting to be, applied. I think from a risk perspective, it's really a matter of we're in a transition time and we're going to be in a transition for a while. So it's going to take society some time to be able to, humanity, to get with it.
Mm-hmm.
And then governance, and there's going to be a lot of lawsuits. The government's going to have to get involved to help to put some guardrails around it, but we know how fast government moves. And so my hope is that we see a combination of technology and government come together on this, because there's no way government's going to keep up. Even now, you go talk to them about cybersecurity or ask them to spell FIPS, not so much.
Yeah.
So it's going to be, and it's going really fast. So we're going to have to all come together.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I would thank you so much for everyone's shares. So to say, I would like to add a couple of things. So I'm very happy that you addressed bias already, because the IPP or I conducted a study on responsible AI governance or on AI governance in privacy last year, and we also asked a couple of organizations what they see as top risks in the space of AI and privacy, and top risk was bias. Second was bad governance inside their own organizations or in organizations in general. And third was lack of legal clarity, because of course we have a lot of already existing regulations covering AI, but the EU AI Act will be coming up. It will have extraterritorial effect if you offer your service in the EU. So this is something we should really ramp up our governance structures for covering AI. And what I also wanted to touch upon in terms of opportunities, which might bridge this gap maybe between privacy concerns and leveraging data. So for example, we have Jordan here. Jordan and I had a panel on the US strategy for privacy enhancing technologies at one of our conferences. So there's so many government initiatives that want to support privacy enhancing technologies, like for example, differential privacy for anonymizing data in a way that you can still have the utility of the data, or federated learning that Google is doing, and others, like where you send the machine learning model to the data on the device and you combine it with other techniques. So I think there are a lot of new technologies are also out there that can enable privacy protections while really working with especially machine learning. And we have so many great results, right, in medical research, breast cancer detection, Alzheimer's, or also for in the financial sector where you have know your customer requirements or IP issues, and you can share the outputs of collaborative machine learning without like having your data inputs exposed to your collaborator.
Thank you. Thank you. The common thread on that was everybody had a generative use case, right? We hear more generative. It's almost like the current big data. I'm sorry. Not sick, but just have a little bit of cough. Sneeze guard. Get the subway thing over. Anyway, no, it's the generative use case, and I think as I was talking to some people out in the reception area, they're just happening so fast. So for again, selling products, and every tech company does that, and you're selling outcomes. All of a sudden, I think AI can drive that. They can sense the direction of the wind for first responders. They can, get monies out to needed people. And I think that's the really cool thing my personal opinion is anytime you try to shun some sort of technology that's past the hype cycle, right? you tend to get sometimes run over by it. But you sort of have to get into it and find a way to embrace it. So I'm going to jump to the next question, right? And I think it affects all of us, not that we're all in tech, but many of us are. So let's talk about how AI is going to impact the job market. This has sort of been the year or two where, starting with a couple, it's sort of the CFO or HR's excuse to drop 10 to 15% of the entire staff. Not by default, but, I don't think Twitter saying I can get rid of 75% of the people and still run the company, with 50%, 40% growth trajectory. I don't think that helped, a lot of us in tech, because all of a sudden I feel like, I can cut that. So let's talk about AI and, helping people do work better, understanding these tech trends. And why don't I Carlos, let's start with you in terms of how do you think AI is going to affect the job market? Knowing that it kind of already has.
The big irony is that the companies who have laid off people are the companies that are doing AI. Companies that are not doing AI actually are not laying off people, which is a bit of a paradox. No, actually, there's a much wider issue at hand with the job market, and that is a demographic shift that we're experiencing around the world. And people, our population is getting significantly older, particularly in Europe. In the US, it's less of an issue. But in Europe, in South Korea, and Japan, so actually, if you look at, for instance, in Japan, they are absolutely desperate to automate almost everything that they can. And you know what's the first one? Is agriculture. It's like the average age of a farmer in Japan is 67 years old. And they have very few children, and none of them actually want to be farmers. So you would be amazed at the amount of innovation that is happening with AI on agriculture. So a consequence is that we're actually going to have a lot more machines doing the farming. And that is not because we're losing jobs, it's because people don't want to do or are not available or are not allowed to migrate in order to do those jobs. The second aspect that, and I already alluded to it, is the fact that when you're taking some of these routine clerical tasks out of the way, jobs become more engaging, and then the employees are starting to handle more outliers, more difficult cases where human judgment is required. There's not enough data to take care of those situations. And in a very natural way, there's an upskilling of those employees who are using inferences in their daily jobs. And guess what? They become more valuable. And if you don't raise their salaries at pace, they actually move on because they have more opportunities. They're actually training themselves significantly faster. So these are two aspects that I see. I haven't really seen any examples of people getting fired because of AI. Maybe you can help me find some, but I haven't come across any cases like that.
And I like the way, and I'll open up to people. One of my personal passions is that I started when I was pretty young, and I think I tripped into the point of view, but just understanding demography. And if you understand demography, whether it's inside the US or outside, a lot of, spend cycle, bust cycles, they're somewhat predictable. So I think if you layer on some of the technology trends in terms of the demographics, it starts to tell a richer story. So thank you for sharing that. Eric, any thoughts on that? We're one of those tech companies that is using AI and having reductions. So
yeah,
Hot
exactly.
potato.
I think, yeah, thanks. I agree. I haven't seen yet people getting laid off because some company implemented AI so well. I haven't seen it, and I'm eager to learn of examples if they're there. I do see, Carlos, a great example of like, hey, there's just nobody to do farming in Japan because of the demographics. Similarly, I have, just from personal experience, I had the things that got me kind of hooked on this, where I said, I don't want to do anything other than machine learning for the rest of my career, if, Lord willing. It was one in government outcome and one in financial services. And they were both like massive impact through AI, but it was dollar savings in one case. And it was insurance, like efficiency, like workers' comp. But it was basically, it was the first ever fully automated workers' comp in the United States, and it got approved by the state, and that's a big thing with, workers' comp, heavily regulated industry, and just being able to model exactly what a business should pay. The business saves money, the losses were stable, but the company had lost 50% of its market share and fired, well, this was the fourth CEO. So a lot of times companies, everybody says they're doing AI, because if you're a C-level executive, the board is telling you, you need to do this. So everybody's sort of saying they are, and they might engage. I mean, this is something we filter against, is somebody going, oh, the big initiative at this major brand, and they really want to do AI. And we're like, well, what do you really, like, what's your business pain? Like, is somebody going to get fired if you keep getting the results you're getting? Like, is there real business pain? Because adopting it isn't easy. It's getting easier and easier, but it's still not easy. So do people want to sort of arm wave that they're doing it, but are they really implementing it? That's kind of what I see. I just see a lack of actually implementing it until things are a dumpster fire. So when you're on your fourth CEO and you lost 50% of your market share, you're going to change. And that's when we were able to do something pretty exciting. Same thing, this was in a national security context, is like roadside bombs in Iraq. #1 killer of troops in the early 2000s, like massive spend trying to fix that. And me and someone else came up with a predictive geospatial temporal predictive capability that said kind of the where and when those are going to be, and it worked, along with like some operational tweaks and things. And the year later, they spent more than $1 billion less than they had spent the billions of dollars the year before. But again, number one national security threat in the United States, essentially. And massive problem with a workers' comp insurer. So I almost feel like you only really do AI, and even in those cases, nobody lost their jobs. It's just jobs became, people who were doing a lot of routine tasks were freed up to do more complex, more high value add tasks, and there was a lot of money saved. So yeah, I think people only really adopt it when they have to, and when they have to is when they're in bad business shape. And otherwise it's a lot of arm waving, and it's a lot of optics. So that's what I think. So the impact on the job market comes down to, what's being done that's not good use of people's time. Right. And if you can apply it there and have a business impact, then that really drives that outcome.
Well, I think I think we probably all get it in this room, but it's the manufacturing, the companies that don't have AI, and they can cut food quality time, right? It's the industrial, the manufacturer, the first responders, things that are critical that, we need food, right? We need to eat. And so if you take a look at those natural resources, food, energy, water, applied there, you're probably going to have some generative use cases, no pun intended. But I know we've got a couple more maybe points of view before we move on in terms of the market. I mean, are we going to have more lawyers? Is there going to be more litigation? I was joking before here. I said, probably 6 months to a year ago, maybe 2 years ago, I told my son, well, you've got to go to, get a computer science degree. And I saw everything happening in the industry. I'm like, maybe law school is not such a bad thing. So, I mean, I think there's room for both, but I can send him his resume when he graduates in 5 years.
Yeah. Right here.
Yeah.
I think these issues need to be looked at first in the near term and then over the much longer term. And I think in the near term, what you're describing is exactly right. And in the legal profession, the way we look at these tools is that we look at them as ways to make us more efficient, more valuable to our clients. I was playing with this Harvey tool yesterday with a couple of our associates and was pretty blown away at some of the capabilities of the tool. And I thought, the future of this really is in not necessarily in the playing around in the playground with ChatGPT 3, but in these specific use cases where a company takes the technology and then really perfects it for a particular function. And I think there's a lot of interesting things you can do there. But in terms of the job market, I actually think that there will be implications longer term. I think, trucking industry, autonomous manufacturing, warehouses, it's not just AI. It's AI plus all of the other technologies that are going to mature, that are going to displace more kind of manual physical labor or some of those things. And I think we need to think proactively about what the implications of that kind of technology is. But
I would like to add something.
Yeah.
So I'm also not aware of any jobs that get replaced by AI, but what I'm seeing is this lack of skills on the market. So we really, the companies say we need people who know how to do bias detection, although there's a lack of standards and benchmarks still, but like a lot of this work and also explainability is on the data scientist working with the data. And so I think we will need more of them, and also of lawyers, of course, understanding everything. And we could also name privacy engineers, like people who really, like engineers who implement privacy requirements in IT infrastructure, services, and products. And here we, for example, last year it was PwC that already called the lack of privacy engineering talent, the privacy engineering talent shortage, a privacy megatrend for last year. So we have a shortage of privacy legal people, of privacy engineers. And I think we also have a lack of people really knowing how to translate principles for the responsible use of AI into services and products. So I think it will create jobs, actually.
Yeah, I think you're probably right. But it goes up to the upskilling or skilling up, right? Like how fast are we going to do that? The enablement piece. Mm-hmm. So I'm gonna touch on one that we'll give, and we're going to do Q&A at the end, but allows us the opportunity to be a little bit vulnerable in terms of how we think about how we're going to interact with one another. So, along came, Web 1, Web 2. We've been talking about Web 3, and social media interactions could be positive or maybe not so much, and you just replace the Thanksgiving or whatever family dinner, table with something else. And so how do you think AI, and we already have it, right? Obviously we've had it at Google, Facebook, Microsoft. How do you think the AI, based on your experience, as I was talking to my mother this morning, and she had the Alexa on, and all of a sudden she said, sure, it's cold here in San Luis Obispo. And I'm like, just wait about 15 minutes, and all of a sudden you're going to get a served ad through cross, device stitching for hat and gloves. So it's already here. The question is, where is it going? So that really engages this entire panel. But from a consumer experience with AI, love-hate relationship with, e-commerce, whatever. What do you think it's going to do to how are we going to interact? I mean, we're still going to do this, right? Luckily, hopefully. But how's it going to influence our interactions, and how do we get in front of those potentially bad experiences and create more of the good experiences, right? Specifically to you, Katerina, like where privacy, isn't resold and data brokers, which were good for a period of time until it wasn't, right? If you get the law of large numbers. So, Brad, do you maybe want to take a crack at that?
Wow.
It's broad, I know.
It's very broad.
I said it was the opportunity to be vulnerable, not you had to be vulnerable. Yeah.
Yeah, we'll just start with I'm completely vulnerable on this one. I think that we as a society have been farmed for a long time, and our data has been farmed. And I think that moving forward, hopefully, we will have an opportunity where data can be put more on an island, and we can decide what of our data gets put onto that island from a privacy perspective, and we have more choice. And also, you look at, Amazon is the main one from a shopping perspective. It knows, it has algorithms, it can basically predict and tell you, what you want and what you'll need for your vacation to Cancun. And so, less thinking. So the key, I think, with AI is to say, how does it get moving forward, to Stephanie's point, further forward? And so thinking more, beyond just Cancun, but think more in terms of, well, what are the other details and other things that I might need either before, not the before preparing, but even like the going to the airport stuff and the landing, and like, what's my ground transportation going to be, and how can I make that the best possible, most fluid thing? So those elements, and then, exiting, and then what artifacts do I want to have from that vacation? Is it pictures? Is it the pictures I took? Is it pictures that somebody else took of me? But I can be able to potentially go and get those too through AI because that person was maybe geofenced or geolocated in at the same place. Maybe they were with me, maybe they weren't, maybe they were part of my group or party. But this way it's something that can be shared more holistically, you know. That's my stab at it.
Want to take a crack, Eric? Go ahead, you were grabbing the mic.
Yeah, from interactions, I mean, I spend a lot of time on automating conversations. So I think that's, going to be a significant impact. A lot of customers are asking about, hey, I want ChatGPT, and really what they want is just conversational AI that's not really painful to automate these frontline conversations, internal and external, both on voice and text, on the web and SMS and all these different channels. So I think that will be, that's definitely an impact that's coming, is fewer live conversations between two people in a business context or in a consumer, B2C or B2B context. And then there's scaling motions. Like we have a partner that we're having do initial POCs for OpenAI, and it's called Zamo.ai. And basically what they built is this AI, basically taking all our Microsoft services and wrap them all together in a way that used to take me working with customers 15 months to build something that wasn't as powerful, but because it's so painful, to build everything from scratch. But basically get a customer live really quickly. And so like, hey, well, they usually don't start at the contact center, but they'll start with an internal and then put it on a phone. And then, hey, you can do this on SMS. And it's all these different channels. Oh, well, now the contact center team's interested. And so once people see that it's possible, that you can do it well and do it at scale, I think that's what I see as the biggest impact. And then all these other AI services are quite powerful. So for example, a lot of people are asking about, I want to put ChatGPT against all my internal data. That's probably the most common thing that I hear. Like, well, you're really not going to retrain this large language model on your data. That's not really how it works, but there's things you can do that will vectorize it, look at your documents and sort of vectorize them and graph them and then make them accessible when someone queries. But the idea is, hey, it might make sense to use AI search over here. That's going to make more sense for that. So now you have what Gartner calls composite AI, where you're using these different types of AI, some language, we have our, language models that is separate from OpenAI, and both those are very powerful, but they don't make sense in every case. They make sense in certain cases. And so when you bring those together and then combine it with document translation and cognitive search and all these things, it becomes pretty powerful pretty fast. And I think that is automating conversations at scale that become very valuable conversations that you couldn't do before without just years and millions of dollars of spend and just a lot of like crawling over crushed glass. So I think that's what's coming. And so that will be the societal impact on how AI impacts our interactions, fewer conversations in a B2C or B2B context, because that AI is coming together in a very fast, powerful way.
I would like to share or admit that I'm a real fan of the metaverse by now. So I bought a VR for my son. He's 9. He was using it for some days, and it was just lying around. And I was having a brunch with friends. They used it, and then I used it for the first time. Have you ever tried Oculus, like a Quest 2? I mean, it's amazing. I mean, the graphics are so good, and I only bought the basic model. So I bought a second one so we can meet and play gorilla tag together, but it's just still so uncomfortable. And I think Google and probably others are working on that you can like Zoom or have these video chats with a Skylink, right? That you have the other person like somehow in 3D in front of you, or you have those new screens that will also like have a 3D experience. So I think maybe we'll really have more interactions in some kind of metaverse or so. But I think it will never ever replace being happy to come together.
Yeah. It's good that your kid threw it away after 3 days. So there was they were looking at the VR adoption, globally. Well, this is a U.S. study, and they realized that insurance claims for not home appliances, but for TVs, insurance claims were going up because they said I was using my VR gog. I stepped over here and I smashed my Samsung TV, and so there's all these great experiences, and then all of a sudden these financial impacts are somebody walks off the anyway, safety issues, but no, it is fun once you do. I was got version 1 or 2 with my son and my daughter. It's a cool experience. We need that scale and processing power. I was talking to one of our co-hosts here with companies like NVIDIA to create that processing power so we can do it at the enterprise level. Carlos, I'm sorry, you were maybe going to say something on the topic? Both of you, sorry.
Yeah, I'll make an observation, and this topic that you're discussing here is not really directly related to AI in any way, shape, or form. The migration towards the screen is something that has happened even without AI. And we have actually a lot of people completely distracted, even in this meeting right now at the moment, because they're looking at the telephone, right? And this is just something that is happening, and it is actually affecting deeply relationships between people. You probably notice that when kids get together, actually they sit around and they are actually on the phone. They're not really talking to one another. I don't know about you, but I think that is a real problem. Now you extrapolate that into people in their 20s, and people are not that interested in relationships anymore. And people are getting married later, if they get married, and then they have very few kids. This is a little bit of a wheel. Now, AI definitely can make things worse. And for instance, the TikTok recommendation engines are absolutely, they are it's a masterpiece.
Yeah.
Okay, those recommendation engines are some of the biggest models in the world. Wow. And they do an excellent job at training them. And people need to be aware of what happens when you spend 4, 5, 6 hours a day in front of a screen, basically in leisure. You're not really learning anything. You're not acquiring any skills. You're not communicating, and then your social skills actually go down. Well, right? Yeah, that is normal. So it is incumbent upon us parents to actually make sure that our children understand the consequences of using tools in this manner.
So, Carlos, go ahead.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. I have my kids are grown. One's finishing college, the other's a PhD student in quantum computing, and both of them spend a lot of time on their phone. I was going to say their phones. The quantum computing guy's he's not on TikTok. The other one, she makes an art of making sure that the recommendation engine shows her exactly what she wants to see. If anyone gets on her TikTok, she freaks out. But I think I actually think that it is going to be really important for big tech to show consumers that AI is going to be trustworthy, because unless people have confidence that it really is trustworthy and it's being managed responsibly, they could easily reject it. And these investments could wither. And so there are lots of potential risks, but in my mind, they can be managed with the right resources, but it takes real resources to do it. And I'm less concerned about the companies with substantial resources managing trustworthy AI than I am with companies that don't have the resources and are really motivated to just get something out quickly and not necessarily put the same kind of thought into it. There was something I just have to read this to you guys, because Brad Smith, who I really respect at Microsoft, put something out I think it was this week, and he said, "We must ensure that AI serves society broadly, not narrowly. History has also shown that significant technological advantages can outpace the ability of people and institutions to adapt. We need new initiatives to keep pace so that workers can be empowered by AI, students can achieve better educational outcomes, and individuals and organizations can enjoy fair and inclusive economic growth. our most vulnerable groups, including children, will need more support than ever. And that really resonated with me, that these tools have tremendous potential, but they also carry a lot of responsibility.
I think, I think everybody's head's nodding, but what you said, and Carlos, the first thing I had actually to be vulnerable, and, I live in San Clemente, I've spent a lot of time in the Bay Area. I decided to drive up because I was telling my son, you're on TikTok, you're on Instagram. It's like, and I had to look in my own mirror that I just plant myself in front of the laptop, even on vacations, guilty. And it was a completely different experience driving up here. I was like, and that's honestly, I'm not sick. I was on the phone all day, and it's like I'm starting to lose my voice. And I got up to about Gilroy, and I said, "All right, now I got it, thanks." But I'm like, "Oh, this is like, you're seeing the trees, and it's a real life experience, and it was enjoyable." I'm not sure if the 10 hours going home will be as enjoyable, but the TikTok, the screen time, I do think we need to do a better job of that. And I think what we need to learn from AI is there's going to be a platform conversation in the industry that'll include all of us, but it's going to go from their model from social media to social commerce, as an example, right? Something that Amazon does quite well. I think others will have to follow, because you can't monetize the privacy. Now that privacy guardrails and, Apple tracking technologies, cookieless environments, the game's changed for marketers. And I think this new innovation of AI is going to be really game changing, both in our current companies and the startup community. We're kind of, go ahead.
Because I would like to add something that what could be the consequence if you do not use AI responsibly, or do not take care that it's like somehow transparent and fair. Because the FTC also has published 3 blog posts already, like they expect AI systems to be maintained in a responsible manner. And we also have 3 FTC cases already where the FTC demanded that the algorithm, not only the data that was illegally somehow collected and processed, needed to be deleted, but the algorithm which was trained with the data was actually asked by the FTC to be destroyed. So that's a huge investment, of course, of companies, and that's a real risk, a business risk, I think.
Yeah. And I think we'll just close on this, the future of AI. If we don't understand veracity about source data between one another in our consumer lives and our business lives, how do we understand it geopolitically, right? And that's not a political statement, just like what's going on in the world, and how do we understand it? Because right now we're just kind of like, some of us are just like, I don't know, something going on over there, and so that's a different discussion. But I think what we would do is transition to Q&A, and I'll sort of end with Eric. What we talked about is you're moving from applications to applications. And I think Slack published a study, maybe it was a year and a half ago, that we waste 10 weeks every year, 10 weeks. I know it sounds crazy, switching between applications, right? So if you want to create a new app, go do it, but it's got to be like game changing. There's the concept of the super app, replatforming, social media turning social commerce. I think these are emerging trends that we're all going to take part in. But with a few remaining minutes that we have left, and I just want to thank all the panelists and for your time. Q&A, hand raise. All right, let's see. You went up first.
Microphones.
Oh, microphone. Yeah, sorry.
Sure, green.
Yep.
Hi, my name is Elena. I have a question that is long term. In your schools, they already have forbade students to use AI, ChatGPT specifically, to do homework. I am worried. Will future students be able to have problem-solving skills when everything is done for them? And how will it affect business? Or in 10, 15 years, the new generation of workforce? Does it make sense for businesses to start creating some programs for schools to increase to promote problem-solving skills, just foreseeing that this could be a problem in the future? Thank you. What do you think?
I personally think that it's the same as with like new, books were like books were, when books came up and children read a lot of books, it was like, don't read books. Then TV came, don't watch TV. Like then tablets, don't use the tablet. Now it's like the next thing. I mean, the things I tried to like, to my prompts, the results I got were either wrong or just super boring. So I don't feel threatened, also not in that sense that students will not be able to think anymore through those tools, because we still need to assess it and we need to teach in school, like not only like what's a good newspaper, what's a bad newspaper, but then like how to deal with those tools. I think that's where it's gonna go, to educate about the tools and the risks.
Brad, do you have a comment?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the positive side of it is that, you know, our educational system needs an overhaul anyway. We don't know that.
Yeah.
I mean, let's be clear. So if this helps to inspire that overhaul, game on, because it's gonna force critical thinking. We need critical thinking. When, you know, the way it's been done is, it's not serving our country and frankly the planet. So if this can help to inspire us to move forward and really kind of get the oars in the water and pull hard, great. I mean, bring it. I mean, it needs to be governed. Needs to be watched, to your point. I mean, I completely agree with you, but I also see the shiny side to say there's good opportunity here as well, and it's kind of a good wake-up call.
I believe there's an application or a company that is coming up which can.
Sorry.
I believe there's an application that's coming up that can find whether the answer was from ChatGPT. Because in our company, when we send code for software engineers and they apply for jobs, we send a codality to use to send the projects to them. So when they copy the code from some other source, it can tell whether it was original or copied. I think the same thing will happen for the ChatGPT as well.
Yes, I think so too.
The BBC just did BBC did a study I was listening to, I think last week or 2 weeks ago, that with the MCAT and a few other standardized tests, it would get a B or B minus. So maybe it's just like better competition, right? Like you've got Michael Jordan out there, you got to beat him. And so it's just like, you know, kind of eliminating the race to the bottom. It's like you got to do better than ChatGPT to pass the class. Right? And if you can determine what the threshold was for ChatGPT, that's the bell curve, right?
Okay.
And every kid in every college
Jordan,
class
LeBron.
hates the smart kid.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
Exactly. What I want to mention was like the biggest risk that people mentioned were bias and privacy. And those two are highly, highly correlated. And I'm not sure if that's self-evident to everyone, but the worst thing in my mind that can happen is that we segment those things. So we lock down all the private data, right? And we view bias as separate. Look, if you raise a kid in a racist household, I don't know what the numbers are, but they're probably likely to be racist. I'm still a Chiefs fan to this day because I grew up in a Chiefs family. It was good for me this year.
Wisconsin?
But growing up in, you know, the late 80s and 90s, it wasn't so good to be a Chiefs fan. So it worked out later. We need that private data to make our models less biased, right? If the main thing companies want to do is like, hey, make ChatGPT with my data, it's just going to reinforce those norms. It's going to reinforce the TikTok recommendations.
Yeah.
We need to use that private data. To her point, there are technologies where we can use the private data with the cryptographic guarantees, but right now it seems like the dialogue that's going on is these are separate things. We need to lock down our data and not use it. That's going to make more biased models. And do we want our models being generated off of this data of the next generation of that data is going to be the TikTok users. So like the metaverse, that is impacting these AI models. It will, because that's going to be the new predominant population that the models are learning from. My question is, do we view these things as the same? Like, how do we couple the bias and privacy problem? Because I believe they're actually the same problem.
I think there's some regulations, for example, in the UK and others. There's an article was just written like 1 or 2 weeks ago. It was published on the IPP website that new regulations foresee or allow for the collection of sensitive data for the purpose of bias prevention. So I think it's going in that direction.
Yeah, because the vulnerable populations we're talking about is the one that had the least input into the model.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep.
So they are going to be excluded in these models.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's a really deep topic. I mean, I totally agree. It's not beyond, it's probably another one of these sessions, you know? And it can divide the room at times, just depending on where you stand on it. But generally, we're a tech for good engine.
Let me just throw a thought in
yeah.
really quick, which is stay in the conversation.
Right.
Beyond today, right? Everybody lean in, be interested, and be curious about it, because we are setting history and the foundation for our society. It's not going to be a version and it's going to move on to a new version.
Yep.
Whatever we're doing now is going to inform the future. So participate and get your kids to participate in it and your significant others, because it's on.
Yeah. Go ahead.
One thing I wanted
And then
to
Emilio.
talk about real quick, a comment and then a question. So I do have 3 Gen Z daughters that could probably take anyone here to task on a topic. But my point in that is critical thinking. So yes, we have this, AI and different tools, but we need to question, right? I think we've seen the last several years of people, oh, it's on the internet, it must be true. I think one of the most important things we need to do is be focusing in our homes and in the workplace of critical thinking. Challenge everything, right? And that doesn't mean it's not true, but one of my concerns is this real? Is this AI? And not that AI is bad, but one of the things I'm thinking about is, did this come from a person or a machine? It's not a bad thing, it's critical thinking. So I think that is really important to think about critical thinking. We should not underestimate this TikTok generation. I have 3 girls that love TikTok, but there's more to life than TikTok. I'll just stop there.
Yeah.
One of my questions legally, though, because I saw this, we hear about deep fakes and AI. Well, it's candidly not deep fakes anymore, because I spent 45 minutes creating a deep fake video, which was basically, I took a picture, I used ChatGPT to create a script, and I went to this website and I basically made myself say something that I generated, right? So I think, we hear about deep fakes, but now it's so easy to replicate anything. And then I saw this separate video of Leonardo DiCaprio. Basically, he was Leonardo, then he was Beyonce, and then he was Rihanna, and then he was like Brad Pitt. Like, I don't know exactly who, right? But I'm thinking, like, okay, if we start taking pictures of people and putting words in their mouth, and like I've been thinking about, I'm like, what legal rights do I have if somebody takes my likeness and takes AI and puts words in my mouth? Like, what's that impact? So I think about these other things, but I am also thinking about, one, we need to be critical thinkers, but do we, is it freedom of speech or is it infringing on people's rights? If I take Eric's face and basically make a video promoting AWS on LinkedIn, does he have any rights?
Yeah,
anyway,
he does.
I'll stop there. That's my question.
So he does, and so there could be a claim for violation of rights of privacy or rights of publicity. They're legal claims. Here's the problem, though. If you have a malicious actor that's operating offshore and producing these videos, then best of luck to you in enforcing your legal claims. So really the question is, what are the approaches that can be taken? And I would turn to you guys around this to address those risks from a technical standpoint so that the technology isn't misused in that way, or how do you mitigate it? And then on your point about being able to identify when what you're reading is generated by an AI tool versus by a person. Again, I think that there are technical tools that are already being developed. They're not perfected yet to do just that, and to try to identify. But I'm sure Eric would be the first to admit, ChatGPT 3 can produce some really crazy stuff. It hallucinates. we have done side-by-side comparisons.
That's a technical term.
It is. It will make up stuff and give it a citation, like a legal citation. And then, so it looks completely, no one knows how this algorithm produced this citation, but it creates it. And unless you go and check the citation, you would think, oh, that's a legal case or that's a law review. But no, it's not. It's just something. So again, that's why, it's a raw tool that now needs to be developed for specific purposes. And Harvey is an example of a company that's taking that technology and then basically vetting out those weaknesses so that it actually can be used in a more reliable way. But the raw technology is not for prime time, and kids shouldn't think it is either. It's got all kinds of interesting.
I'd like to point out that this is not a ChatGPT problem.
Yeah.
Human beings also lie,
Yeah.
right? Have you ever come across that? Yeah. Okay. So, and not only that, malicious intent of any platform is taken very seriously. And I can tell you that absolutely colossal amounts of money are spent every year by social networks, and they're relatively successful at catching some of them. 5 or 6 years ago, there was a problem with terrorism being actually transmitted to social networks, and actually models were trained, NLP models were trained to actually catch a lot of it. Massive amount of money has gone into bullying. Okay, and we have been relatively successful, but these are all statistical techniques. So remember this, please. If you take something away today, there is statistical. Okay, so they're non-deterministic. Therefore, if you have billions of these things happening every day, billions of these messages, even if you catch 99.99999%, there's probably 10,000 or 1,000 or 100,000 that get through. That will continue to happen.
Yep. Let's do James. Yeah, go ahead, James.
Hi, James from Bavarian US offices. I wanted to actually say we're focusing a lot, I feel, on, well, I don't want to say what we have been focusing on, but what I've seen, the discussion around. So, and speaking with a lot of early stage companies, a lot of scale ups, people that want to, especially in the sales and marketing orgs, be more efficient with their time, have been arguing for the use of ChatGPT. And even to the extent where, a startup that I've worked with, a policy guy got a question, took himself off the camera and muted and then asked and then spat out something. And then he was able to answer the question when he re-entered the chat on the panel virtually. I was shocked by that. Also, one person was quoting something and then you look at the citation and it's Epoch Times, which we know Falun Gong is behind. So there are a lot of issues with ChatGPT that I'm finding even with people that I'm working with and also, advising and consulting. My main question is, do you think that we're, as humans who are ingesting all of this information, especially in the business context, I'm less interested in the private context because, well, I don't have kids, but it seems like that's the trend here. Like people are like, I have kids, the kids in social media. I understand that. I think that's great. But the business use case is there because they're meeting efficiencies, right? They get more with their time. They get more outreach. More outreach means, for high touch clients that, for future clients. Do you guys see in the business use case some value? And from that use case, do you think that more, larger revenues, which then for lawyers mean larger paychecks, and for other clients, more data that is to be ingested by AWS? Don't you see the positives of this sort of revolution? And what can you envision coming from it? I had another point, but I've forgotten until now, which is why I should have written down. But that's all I got for now.
Thank you.
Sure. Yeah, there's lots of the business value. I mean, we see marketing teams generating images, but then it's funny if you've seen there's a thing of two hands shaking, and they have 3 wrists because it was generated. Like these images, it's coming. But like Sam Altman says, the CEO of OpenAI, like it's a terrible product. That's his quote, right? But it's powerful, but it's coming. But there's still use cases that are really valuable. Digital marketing, like getting that going faster, generating images. Also, think about this is something I'm working with on one of the world's largest, right? Like fill in the blank, like all these companies are interested in it because they do everything at scale. So if they can save a little bit of time, it's way better for business results. Think about all the trouble tickets or support tickets that get issued in a warehouse of a massive retailer and their entire logistics network and all the IT and logistics and all those support tickets. Well, somebody has to read those. Well, somebody had to write it, which you could generate it, but just on the summarization. So the summarization of text is a massive use case. And that's very powerful because then you can do summaries you can generate the contact center. I just hung up with someone for 4 minutes. I'm a contact center agent. I'm supposed to type up a summary. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't because the next line is ringing. And if it was such a long call, I'm just gonna, type in a few words to not get in trouble and move on. But like the value is in what actually took place. And so if you can automate that and then summarize it and then batch those together, and then bucket those in categories, and then summarize what's happening in those categories. I mean, that is a massive time savings. So that was an example of generative on the image side, summarization on the text side, and there's a bunch of others. But yeah, so I think it's those narrow use cases, like you said, companies that either, hey, we're going to master this for this area of domain expertise. I don't know, what is Harvey? Is that legal? Yeah. So, I mean, every industry, we're seeing that in retail, but several flavors in retail, other places too, is like master it somewhere. And then I think you can really generate that value of just that time savings. There's so much work that gets done in summarizing and describing. And if you can automate that, you get the value and the extracted insights and wisdom from that, without people having to do it and themselves manually.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Emilio? Yeah,
hey, everybody.
And then I know we're kind of getting close. So
yeah,
it's up to you guys.
I'll keep it short.
Yeah.
I'll keep it short.
You guys can hang out afterwards. We'll be here to talk.
So Emilio Reyes-Leblanc from Microsoft. I've never seen customers so excited to talk about artificial intelligence. Every single conversation I've had with a customer over the last 4 weeks has been centered around ChatGPT. And a question I have for the panel is this a Copernican turn in AI? Up until 1500s, we thought everything revolved around the Earth. And then we realized it didn't. And then everyone grew to accept that the world, we revolved around the sun, and now we've got a new view of astronomy. And I wonder how things change from a legal perspective, whether this technology is really that different, or whether this is just a gradient, a line in the history of AI developments that we've seen so far. SageMaker's been around for ages, Azure Machine Learning Studio, but this feels different with customers. And I'm curious to know from the non-vendors, no disrespect, but from the non-vendors, do you see this as a different epoch in AI that we really need to treat differently? Or is this a continuation of the kinds of issues that we've been working on for the last 20 years?
I mean, it's your CEO who said AI is more relevant than electricity and fire, right? It will have bigger impact than electricity and fire. So, I mean, I think it's just evolving, and it's super exciting times. Is it now the turning point for something, do you think?
Well, he said no vendors. I mean, it's an interesting question, right? Because it's like it has penetrated the popular consciousness to such a degree. When neighbors and kids are asking me about stuff I talk about all day in my job, like when has that ever happened? But what are your thoughts?
So I think that we were talking about this earlier, actually. I think this tool has broad appeal because it's so easy to use and you have immediate gratification. Like, you put in a simple request thing and you automatically generate and it's like, wow. Mm-hmm. But so yes, it has broad appeal and everyone's talking about it. I think we need to see the actual reliable, trustworthy use cases that can be commercialized and actually lead to business impact on the enterprise side. And then on the consumer side, I actually think it's trickier because I think this is a toy right now, and it's a dangerous toy because it, you know, it's not a reliable toy. And like you said, Sam indicated that it's not a product, you know, it's toy, it's tool. So I think we need to, you know, see where things go. I tend to be a little more of the Debbie Downer. So maybe I see this more as a progression than I do like a complete turn of events. But I do think that the legal challenges with this technology are immense for reasons that are way beyond what we have time for here. It's very difficult to actually regulate this technology. And because of that, it's going to be much more important, I think, for industry to self-regulate, and there are going to be bad actors. And then how are you going to deal with that? So that's my thought on it.
And my thoughts are, I mean, it's too early to know. It's actually not new, as we know. It's just we're at a point of time where somebody made it commercially easier to digest. So here we are. It will continue to go forward. It will continue to migrate. That's why, again, everybody lean in, because it's building, and somebody else is going to create somebody bigger, better, and faster, which is next week, next month. So the key is, you know, in my mind, is how it gets applied, to your point, commercially, and how it can, again, bring us back to more critical thinking, because that's something that's unfortunately become a bit lost on our society and our offspring, right? So the key is to get people to lean back into doing this, and, you know, and less of looking at the screen, water bottle. So.
I would like to wrap up with my last thoughts.
Sure.
If I'm allowed to. So, yeah, I mean, we should keep in mind that generative AI is not only like ChatGPT and text to essays or whatever. It's like also, I don't know, code generation, like you mentioned at the beginning. Like there's, I think, an open source tool is by Microsoft that like 1 million users already on GitHub, or also for cybersecurity, it will have an immense impact on both sides. So what I want to emphasize, like somehow in the same realm as critical thinking, is what we do in our organization. So I think it's critical that we start thinking about how can we use AI responsibly. There are hundreds of good governance guidelines out there for trustworthy, responsible, ethical AI. That's all the same. It's always the same principles. It's like accountability, security, privacy, data governance, explainability, non-bias. It's always the same principles, no matter like what regulations will come up. That is seems to be some common ground. So if you just start with like bringing some teams together and, for example, start small, take one specific use case or so and say like, which principles do we want to live in our company related to AI? I mean, you can take of those hundreds of examples, and how would we apply this to the specific use case? So in bigger companies, Microsoft, IBM, that's the AI ethics board, and in smaller companies, it might just be a responsible AI working group or so. And I find it so super interesting also. That's why I'm so excited about responsible AI governance, that in those examples that I just mentioned, IBM and Microsoft, they have new responsible AI offices, and they're actually sitting in the privacy office. Yeah, office, like in the and both, like, and then privacy reports to the CISO or to the legal function. But coordinating, in many cases, it is the privacy function or the CPO, which has this project office for responsible AI with satellites in different business departments and so on. So and I had a LinkedIn Live yesterday with Christina Montgomery from IBM and someone from Charter Bank from Singapore about AI governance. And I would recommend watching it because they had those really great insights. So I think that's important to start the journey within our organizations.
And I will just say a few words to what Emilio said. It is absolutely a Copernican revolution for programmers. That is definitely, and it's already here. Huh? It's like yesterday, not today. Yesterday, okay? You will actually talk with people. They are actually 4 to 5 times more productive when they use GitHub Copilot or equivalent tools when they are programming. So that is already the case. Education, for sure. That is already the case. Children are already using it, and I think that to your point earlier, is trying to stop them from using these tools. To me, it's just like the ultimate in laziness, if you will, in terms of the impact on educators. So a lot of universities are actually already going back to exams in the classroom. Okay, with regard to chat with the general public, I don't see it as Copernican at all. This is not trustworthy in the least. People are going to get hurt because they're going to think that they're getting information from an authoritative source, and unfortunately, some of them are going to probably ingest things that they wouldn't, or do dangerous things. And lastly, it may be the last sentence today, but nobody's talking about the electricity consumption of these suckers. We're not, I'm not kidding you. I don't know that we have enough power in the world to adopt AI. I'm not kidding you. Training these models is about 1 terawatt hour and more.
We're bringing the fusion people in next week, right?
That's right. That's right. Yeah, so keep waiting for that one. But it is this.
Cool.
No, the consumption of electricity in this line of research and development is absolutely gargantuan. It's actually sucking resources from other parts of our economy, and we need a lot of power. More and more, if we want to electrify and rely less on fossil fuels, actually AI is competing for that electricity. And that is part of responsible AI, or it should be, if it is not today.
And that I think, can we keep going, or?
Yeah. Well, we'd like
kind of wrap it up.
Let's wrap it up. And what we do, we've already got 2 of our panelists that gave their final thought. Let's let 1 sentence final thought, Brad, Stephanie, and Eric. Thank you.
Yeah.
Tell us what's the call to action? What's the call to action after today's event?
To me, the call to action, I already said it, which is, remain woke to this, right? It's on. And this is the beginning. This is a chapter, I should say, because the chapters already have been written and there's more marketing and it's just been easier to embrace. But, we're setting a foundation for the future moving forward. So the key is to make sure you lean into it. Participate, whatever your station. It's critical for our society. So,
Stephanie?
No, I agree. Engage, and from my perspective, responsible AI really is the future, and the impact on the planet is part of that.
Eric?
Yeah, I think it's coming at us from all directions, and staying engaged and aware is key. The anecdote I love, because it surprised even me, and I spend all day, every day on this, is a world famous DJ in front of 100,000 people says, I went to a generative site, maybe ChatGPT, didn't name it, but I went to a generative site and said, give me 2 lines of a rap in the style of Eminem about the future. He got those 2 lines. He took it to another site that will generate a voice, and he said, give me a voice in the style of, right, which saves you from that legal usage, in the style of Eminem. He played that, and of course, it's 100,000 screaming people, so it sounds just like Eminem, but it's not his voice, and he didn't write the lyrics. So coming at us from all directions. So I love groups like this getting together. Thanks for all your participation. Love to talk more, but I think this is what we need to be doing, is talk about it, exploring these ideas, and kind of finding out how this comes at us in all directions together.
Yeah. Is that good? All right. Well, I think you bring up, and just in closing, thank you so much. And Carol, I think you're, talking about the incentives, that emotional, financial, it's around incentives. And I think that model's going to flip for our kids, and whether you have kids or not. But I think we've walked on to maybe 1 or 2 completely different breakout sessions, but we do have to wrap. And I know people are probably like, oh, okay, is this thing over? But yeah, I know, I got to go home. But I just want to thank you. I want to thank our hosts here at FOMO, Morrison Foster. Ashley here is a fellow colleague. Eric, Carlos, thank you. Stephanie, and Katerina. And most importantly, thank you all for your time.
Yeah.